started. So welcome to the YAR Summer Series presenting LinkedIn. This webinar will be all on using LinkedIn as a young adult with a rare disease, in the rare disease community, as a rare disease advocate. And we have two wonderful speakers here with us today. I just want to quickly thank our Summer Series presenting sponsor, Travere Therapeutics, for this series of Summer Series webinars throughout 2022. Also, some very quick housekeeping. We have closed captioning available in real time. If you go toward the bottom of your screen and click the CC button, you can begin live transcription. You can also use the Q&A box during the presentation to submit any questions. We'll open for some questions and discussion at the end, so feel free to put these in throughout the presentation or at the end as questions come to you. And today's webinar is being recorded and will be online after the fact. So this will also all be available to watch if you want to go back and revisit, or if any of that does come up and you want to share it. All of that aside, I am actually going to pass it to our first speaker to introduce herself and get us started.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Shayna Glickfield. I am a partner with a communications firm called Beekeeper Group, and we help a wide array of clients, corporations, nonprofits, and associations with their digital communication strategies. And through that, we have worked with some rare disease organizations in the past on campaigns to elevate the voices of people with rare diseases and help build grassroots forces to really move policies and issues and get more funding and important things like this. And so I'm excited to talk to you all about all the opportunities you have to lend your voice through just your own LinkedIn platform to help raise the visibility of what you are so passionate about. So we will jump right in. The agenda today is just why you use LinkedIn, how to effectively share your story, and then we'll hear from Kyle and he'll share examples and advice as a YAR member, and then we will open it up for questions. So we'll go ahead and jump in. I like to always take a step back and think about social media as a whole, and why social media is so powerful for advocacy and using our voice. If you think about all social platforms, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, they're all just skeletons of websites. And they'd be nothing if people didn't add their profiles and their posts and their status updates. And the more people that participate, the more valuable they become as a platform. And LinkedIn itself has become more and more popular, especially in the pandemic, where people are networking and getting out less. They're really relying on LinkedIn for news, information, and advocacy messages. So you all as advocates really do have an opportunity, and I'll go through some of these benefits here. So the brand and mission advancement, it really is about almost, I know none of us would necessarily consider ourselves marketers, but really we are marketing a message and being visible to people with our message and reminding people about why we're passionate about this cause. So just being vocal is advancing your brand and your mission. Of course, crisis and opportunity management. So say there's a big news story or a breakthrough medicine or anything like that, you don't want to be building up your community when you really want to take advantage of it. So it's important to use and build your community before you really need it in sometimes what's considered a crisis, but oftentimes what's an opportunity to really, when people are paying attention to a cause or an issue, that's a great benefit for you to get involved on social media and elevate that even further. Of course, media relations, a lot of journalists are paying attention to social media. They'll follow hashtags to see who's an expert, who can they use for a quote, just to get ideas for story ideas. So just being visible on social media with your cause or your issue might help bring media attention to it. You never know who's listening. And with that, thought leadership. think what is boring and mundane to each of us is actually quite new and novel and interesting to other people. And so a lot of times when we're encountering an issue every day in our life, or we're reading news related to it, we get kind of desensitized to its importance. So you all really are thought leaders on this issue, on the issues that you follow. And so you have a real opportunity to share your expertise on social media. Search engine optimization, just if someone Googles you or your topic, a lot of times social platforms are the first search results. So that's an important place to be visible. And the last two items here are my favorites, and why social media has become a part of my career and why it's so empowering, is really the opportunity to build community with people, all kinds of stakeholders in your community and around the issue, and to really humanize and inspire people to get involved. So unlike a website where it's kind of flat and static, on social media, we really get to be ourselves a little bit more. And so telling your own story really is about breaking down a complex issue in a way that is relatable and human and inspiring. And so you all really have a lot of power just by being active and visible on social. Next slide. So who is listening? I know sometimes we can put a post out and feel like, oh, it didn't get any reactions or no comments, but a lot of people on social media are what I call lurkers, which means the majority of people are actually just scrolling and paying attention, but they're not being active. And that doesn't mean they're not listening. So when you post something, chances are friends and family can see it, your industry peers and sometimes industry leaders, other stakeholders, so people maybe in the medical community or at other nonprofits, or people who have an interest in your cause or issue. Of course, journalists and media, as I mentioned before, and sometimes even policymakers and their staff, depending on how you build your community. So when you think about who you want to meet and connect with on social, it's great to think strategically about who you want to reach with your messages. Next slide. And again, you are experts. So you have access to a lot of research and data that other people might not know. So facts and statistics and, breaking down kind of dense pieces of research into what that really means to you and your journey. And of course, there's the authentic stories, which can really touch people's hearts. And be more memorable even than research and data. So telling your own story in unique ways, whether that's an image, whether it's text, whether it's a video, and we'll talk more about that, you can really be authentic and connect and motivate people through your own story. Media curation is really helpful. We're all inundated with news day in and day out. So when you share an article, or share something that's important, whether that's medical news, a human story, anything that you think is noteworthy that you want to share, you're curating information, and that can be really helpful in mobilizing people as well. You can also, you're probably following other organizations and other thought leaders who are advancing in these fields. And so you have the opportunity to share what they share and add your insights to it. And of course, if you have any political intelligence, you might be following bills or following legislation that other people might not know about. And so you can raise the visibility of that as well. So things that you encounter and you're following in your day-to-day life could be brand new information to people. So there's a lot of opportunity to share regularly in all these different formats. Next slide. So telling your story. It's important in order to get attention, to kind of portray emotions. And when you're talking about rare disease, that's hard not to do. So when you go and tell your story, you have such an authentic voice, and you are your own central character. And there's so much opportunity there, and you have to find the line you want to share. Sometimes people are comfortable just going live, like the woman in the first picture, and saying, telling a story about their personal journey that day. Sometimes you don't have to be in the picture, and you can just share a picture of something that you encounter or you experience in your day to day that other people might not realize. And that can be a really powerful image for you to tell your story. And, again, things that you do in your life that are impacted, it's just raising visibility in different ways that you might feel comfortable in all different levels. And think about who you're trying to reach with your story so that you can inspire them specifically, because sometimes not all stories are going to be related to everyone. On social media, you're also giving people an opportunity to respond. So sometimes you can pose a question, or people will react, and that helps with engagement. So your story might inspire people. And so you should leave the comments open, I think is what I'm saying, so that people can have an opportunity to react and maybe ask questions and really start a dialogue to help move the needle. The most important thing, I think, if you spend time on social media, including LinkedIn, is to leverage multimedia. And this means that if you just use text, not only do social platforms deprioritize that, but people are more likely to scroll past it. So if you can, use an image or a video. Again, it doesn't have to be yourself. It can be even, just a picture of something that you see in a day and why it was meaningful to you. But that really helps get attention in a noisy scrolling economy. Next slide. Again, I can't say it enough, but you are an influencer. And there's so much opportunity once you start posting to really introduce your cause, your issue, your position, your voice in different ways. And you don't have to go all the way to Capitol Hill to do it, like in this picture. So remember to use hashtags to be discoverable. Hashtags are how we categorize content on the social web, and they can be as broad as we see in this post, this example, hashtag disability rights, and as narrow as hashtag HR 5657, which is the bill number. You never know what someone is going to search, again, a policymaker or a journalist, to try and track a story around issues or legislation. So you can also use multiple hashtags. They also give people clues into what the story is about by calling out the words in a different color. You can amplify and tag partners that you want to connect with. So if you are calling on a policymaker, like your member of Congress, you can try and tag them. You can tag, YAR has a profile, so you can tag different organizations that you might be partnering with. So there's different opportunities to tag people, and that raises the visibility of the post, because then that is seen by who you tag as well. I also call those a virtual handshake. So it's a way of reaching out to someone without actually emailing or calling them. I like to also advise to do what I call sharing a warm take. This is kind of a little bit lower than a hot take. A lot of times we do need to be a little more provocative on social media to get attention, but I know that's not something everyone's comfortable doing. But what you can do is share news and information and share your perspective, share your insight. So if you're sharing new data or information, you can share why that is important to you and enough to share it. Same with news articles, maybe pull a quote out of what you thought was most important. So you can share a hot take or just a warm take along with other news and information so that people are more likely to react and they know why you thought it was important. Again, you are the influencer, you add that extra layer of expertise to your voice. And you can be a curator. So sometimes we don't know what to say ourselves. And so we look to other organizations and share what they're doing. they're doing a lot of research and news, and they might be doing some story collection themselves, and they want visibility on that. So the nicest thing you can do to help out to advance the mission is share what people are already producing and already doing, and then it's a win-win. When it comes to advocating too, it's important to make an ask. Generally on social media, people want to be helpful. So if you want them to do something, it's helpful to tell people exactly what you want them to do. Maybe you want them to share the post. Maybe you want them to contact their member of Congress. Maybe you want them to attend a fundraiser or an event. So just be really clear about what your ask is. And generally people do want to be helpful. And you'll see in this example, there's not a specific ask, and that's okay also. Sometimes you might just want to touch people with your story and raise awareness, but if you do have an ask, be very clear about it. Next slide. Of course, you really do need to fill out your profile to be effective on LinkedIn and all social media. That's the first thing people will look at to identify whether or not they trust you as a source. I think it's really important to have a clear photo. Don't leave a default image. It's just a cartoon silhouette. People don't like to see that. They think you're spam. I've seen people use images where it's a group photo and you don't know which is the individual you're communicating with. Or sometimes people are bundled up in a winter coat with a hat and maybe ski goggles or something on, and you can't see their face. And again, you want people to make a connection with the information and build trust through a screen. So the most important thing you can do is really have a clear photo, ideally making eye contact. You should also identify the city and state that you're from. This is important for advocacy communications so that policymakers and their staff can identify whether or not you're a constituent or not. Also helps, if you're talking about state legislation or things going on in your state or your community, to qualify yourself as a peer and a thought leader in your community. You should also link to more information, and that might be another profile in another social media account, or if there's any website that has more information about you, it's just another way to build trust with your audience, that there's another place they can click to authenticate you are who you are. Again, this can even just be another social media profile. And of course, fill out your bio. Tell people a little bit about yourself. And this is a great kind of icebreaker to be human. So not just about who you are professionally. There's a term now called profersonal, combination of professional and personal. I think a lot of people know our work lives often blur into our personal lives. We often answer emails before we get out of bed, and we might do some personal things while we're at work. So it's okay to add to your bio other things that you're passionate about, your interests, sports teams, anything that helps people get to know you in addition to what you do professionally. And of course, if you're going to be sharing content related to rare disease, you should share at least a hashtag of who you are, of rare disease advocate, and that helps people understand why they might be seeing rare disease content coming from you, and gives you a way to say that you are a stakeholder without having to share too much information that you're not comfortable sharing. And Kyle will go more into depth about how to share your identity and perspectives in a way that is humanizing, but also balances the professional networking piece. Next slide. One concept I just want to leave you with, one of the most common things I hear from people is I don't know what to say. That they see that kind of open status update and don't know what to put out there. And so I encourage you just to think about things you might want to share with a colleague or a peer, and put that out into the public. So excited to be here at #YAR, and you can do a YAR advocacy event, and you can tag maybe a peer or two to say what you're doing. This can be virtual events as well. Just read at, and you can tag a journalist or a publication and share what news you're reading, what data you're processing. You can also share what you're working on. And even if it's not finished, you might want to say, I'm making some progress on, and you can give people a little intro to something that you're working on. You can also post questions. What are your thoughts on? And you can ask about anything from medical research to policies and legislation to news articles, and maybe get some dialogue going with your peers and ask people if they're attending things or what other people's interests are. So just things that are on your mind, I encourage you to share on LinkedIn and help get a dialogue going. And at the same time, position yourself as an expert, which you are. And now I will turn it over to Kyle to go more in depth.
Thank you. Great tips and great advice, and something that I could probably improve my profile with. Hi, everybody. My name is Kyle Underwood. I am a current YAR member. I've been involved in advocacy for a while now. I actually was diagnosed with a rare lysosomal storage disease called mucopolysaccharidosis 2, also known as Hunter syndrome, when I was 4 years old. And from then on, really been involved in a variety of things in the rare disease space. I'm originally from San Diego, California, but now live in Cleveland, Ohio, and I work at the Cleveland Clinic as a program manager. And today I'm really looking forward to kind of providing an example of one way you could put together a LinkedIn profile, and then showing you how I weave my own personal story into my professional journey. But before I get started, I do want to say every LinkedIn is different and it's your story to tell. So while I may include something, it doesn't mean that you have to do it as well. I just want to give you a great example there, and then from there, give you some tips that I've learned along the way. If we go to the next slide. So I'm going to start with the basics. So kind of highlighting some of the things that were discussed earlier around what your LinkedIn profile should look like. So looking at the first slide here, this is really looking at your header. As you can see, I have a nice profile picture. I have my title, my name, my title, where I live. There's a link for contact information, and then my school and work on the right-hand side. One thing that I think is really great is, there's an opportunity, if you like, to use the header portion to put photos of your workplace, maybe recent advocacy things, or potentially other things that you find personal to you in your professional journey. If we go to the next slide, this is really highlighting some of the experiences and education piece. So I'll start with education. It's very important to include education in your LinkedIn profile. This allows employers, other advocates, professionals to see what is your background in, and with that, highlighting, what are some of the things you've done in your schooling. I do want to highlight, maybe you are in school or haven't started school yet, but you could speak to maybe your high school or other pursuits in educational, whether it's a certificate class or maybe you did some college courses, etc. But this is a great place for people to see your background. And then looking at experiences, this is where you can highlight your overall experiences, whether it be working or professionally. And here I talk through some of the different roles I've had in the past year and a half at the Cleveland Clinic. A couple of things I like to highlight is, as you build out, each role, it's good to kind of highlight some of the things you worked on, similar to a resume, linking to some of the things you worked on, some of the activities you got involved in, and maybe some of the areas that you find personable to you. And it helps the audience understand, your background. Go to the next slide. So here is a really good opportunity, and I think sometimes it's missed, is volunteering. I think it's really important to highlight some of the areas where you, as an advocate, have volunteered. And some of the things that I've talked about here include, some of the rare disease opportunities I'm in, as well as the professional roles I'm in. And you can also highlight some of the things you've done in those various roles. And on the right-hand side here, talking about skills. Skills are a great way to kind of identify things that you're really passionate about and something that you're good at. And then people can actually endorse those skills in your network to really show that they approve of them and think that you're doing great there. I continue to evaluate this and build this out as I kind of grow in my professional pursuits and advocacy piece, but it's a great way for people to quickly understand, like, what are you interested in, what are you good at? And then from there, maybe leveraging that in your own advocacy journey. You go to the next slide. So I think the piece here is really understanding, how do you highlight your advocacy? If we go to the next slide here, I wanted to pick a couple different examples around advocacy and how I interweave my own professional journey into it. On the left-hand side, this is speaking to a recent event that I did at a public speaking event, speaking on rare diseases. And it's really some of the things that I incorporate in my posts to really increase engagement, include making sure you tag the organization that you're representing, including emojis or icons that really make the post pop, and then making sure you're tagging and using hashtags related to the conversation you're in. In the middle, this is really speaking more to my professional career and my healthcare journey as an administrator at the Cleveland Clinic. And I use a variety of tags and organization pieces, et cetera. But again, it's really making that post pop so people can really be engaged on it. And on the right-hand side, this is a great way to maybe incorporate a quote or incorporate something that you find valuable to you in your own journey, to then incorporate into a post. So right here, I included a quote and then talk about my experience as an advocate, where you don't have to necessarily speak directly to what your health condition is, et cetera, but you can speak to the collective voice that you're able to bring to the table. So with that being said, I do want to kind of provide some kind of key thoughts on the next slide around tips and tricks for being a rare disease advocate using social media and LinkedIn. I think the first and foremost thing is be honest. We all cherish the ability of being honest, and we look at other people's profiles, and some may be more developed than others, but if you can be true to yourself and be open in a way that you feel comfortable, it's going to speak volumes. For me, when I started off my journey in social media, I wasn't as open with certain things just because I didn't feel comfortable, but I was always making sure that I was clear with the things I was doing and the things I was interested in. This kind of links into the next piece, is that, it is your story and you really need to own how you want to share it. So as I described, my profile is one way of doing it, but if you feel more comfortable being more forward with your condition or your rare disease, or if you're more willing to be kind of a step back and be more focused on your professional journey, it's your own story and you can craft it in the best way you think. With that being said, I think it's really important to leverage, your peers and other individuals in the community to kind of see what are some opportunities for best practices and have a little bit of fun with it. I think something that is often missed is talking about gaps in your resume or your journey. I think something that can be really valuable is in your bio section and speaking to those gaps and being honest again around, during this time, maybe I had some medical things or things like that, but during this time I volunteered here, or I got involved in this. People are less likely to judge you based on the gaps if you are honest with them and speaking to what you did to overcome that adversity. Leverage others for support and inspiration. I think there's a wealth of resources both within the community and externally around social media and LinkedIn. But I think the biggest thing you can do is take a little bit of nuggets from each and really build it into your profile. I most recently started using the icons and emojis. I've seen it to be a really big hit, and it provides some fun flavor to your profile. And also if you ever want to reach out to myself or others in a rare disease space, people are more than willing to have a conversation to build out your professional brand. And I keep on reiterating, it is not a one size fits all approach. I think everybody can build their profile differently, and it's really about how you want to frame your story. Taking the tips I shared earlier, it can really make sure that you have the best engagement and opportunity to communicate with the audience that you do. But it's also an opportunity to be creative and have fun. I think as you look to building out your own personal brand, realize that LinkedIn is just one piece of it, but it's a great way to really understand how you can make an impact in the advocacy community.
There we go. I want to say thank you to both Kyle and Shanna for going through all of this so much. I'm just going to give a few really quick highlights and then get into more of the Q&A and discussion. So if you do have any questions as I go, now is also a great time to go back and start adding some of them to the Q&A. We can get through as many as possible throughout the Q&A. But just some very quick highlights. If you're watching this and you are new to YAR, YAR offers support year-round to young adults. We're open to those in the rare disease community who are between 16 and 30 years old. And you can find out more at hearUsyar.org. We do a lot of other things around leadership development, public speaking, and otherwise empowering young adults in the rare disease community to live up to their full potential and really influence public policy at the federal and state levels. I will also note, currently we have nominations open for our Rare Voice Awards. These will occur in December of 2022, December 14th. The deadline for submitting nominations is September 6th. So you have a little bit of time from today. If you can think of anyone, an individual or an organization that has advocated for policy change in 2021 or 2022, this is a great opportunity to just recognize them, thank them for their work, tell them they're appreciated, and also encourage others to get involved in a similar way, share their story, just create some of that larger motivation and community change. As we've been talking about all throughout today, your network is one of the most important things. So this is a nice chance to take a step back and look at that. And then finally, if you're involved in a young adult patient organization or group, and you're interested in meeting other organizations that work with young adults in the rare disease space, whether that is an umbrella organization or a disease-specific group, definitely refer them to our Young Adult Coalition. You can email Lindsay for more information, whose email is at the bottom of this slide. And then finally, I'm just going to share some contact information. I encourage you to take a picture or a screenshot of this really quickly if you're interested in following up with either of our speakers. This is just a nice chance if you do have more questions or you want to address anything with them to be able to do so. Same if you want any of the contact information for YAR. We have our LinkedIn, we have our Instagram, and also the 2 emails for me and Lindsay who you can contact. Thank you so much again for listening to today's webinar. I'm going to ask Shanna and Kyle to both come back and just get things started off with some questions. We have a few different ones already in the Q&A, so I'm actually going to just start with those, and you both can jump in depending on how you feel. But this one, Kyle, I might put to you first, just because I think that might be helpful with your example. But is there a best way to showcase education if yours is not in the field you are currently pursuing for work?
That's a great question. I appreciate the feedback from the group. I think the biggest thing for me is I think you always want to highlight your education because it speaks to your experiences and the fact that you took time to go through that schooling, etc. I know a lot of people that, their major or their background is completely different from where they end up working. So it's not going to be a detriment. I think a great opportunity to lean on maybe that shift in a different direction is maybe speaking to it in your bio, or maybe even bringing it up in some of your experiences that come after it. Another thing I didn't mention, but you can have a header at the top of your LinkedIn where you can say, looking for opportunities or things you're interested in. I think that speaks to it. But I would never tell anybody not to include education on their LinkedIn profile because it's you're trying to pivot, because it does speak to the work and the grit and the tenacity you've done to get to that point, and you can only just keep on going from there.
That's great. Shanna, do you have anything to add? I don't know if we covered it or if you have any other advice.
No, I agree. All experience is in some way probably applicable in the next step in your journey into who you are. And so unless there's something that's important not to disclose in order to advance, then I think err on including.
Great, that's super helpful. I'm actually going to ask off of sort of the last thing that you just mentioned. One of the questions we also got a lot from some of the young adults going into this webinar was how to successfully frame your advocacy or talk about resume gaps if you're not fully ready to disclose, or if you're ready to disclose maybe parts of your journey and not others. So what advice would you have for people who really want to talk honestly about their advocacy or highlight the real accomplishments they have, but maybe don't want to get into the entire part of their journey yet? How do you balance that?
I think as part of your bio, to include just that you're a champion or an advocate and involved. People might assume it's a relative or just, a friend, or nobody has to know the details. They just help qualify that this is something that you have an interest or passion in. And so putting it up front as just in a series, as just a part of who you are and what you advocate for, I think helps people understand when they do see content related to it, but doesn't necessarily beg the question of like who or why. It just, a lot of people are champions for different causes. I think in my bio, not on LinkedIn, I think on Instagram, I have something around a nonprofit I'm on the board of that protects kids. I don't have kids, and that's okay. But the nonprofit that I'm affiliated with is a part of what I do with my time, and therefore who I am. And so just saying you're an advocate for, I think is okay, and gives people inspiration and connection, even without telling a full story.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think for me, I've never necessarily went straight outright, said this is my condition and it's what I have on LinkedIn. I think it's really about weaving the narrative around speaking to the experience you've done and the opportunities you've done and the impact you made. Because I think a lot of times, people think, oh, you have to be out at the front of the gate with everything that, you're advocating on, but it's really about what are you advocating? Is it newborn screening? Is it, increased research funding? And that can be very broad, but it shows that you're helping the community in some way. I think another thing you can do is if you feel you're not really ready to disclose information related to your health condition, especially with gaps in your resume, I think it's really highlighting what maybe you did during that time. That was maybe, it could even be, you took a gap year and you just enjoyed reading a or educating yourself. Like it doesn't have to be this lofty thing, as long as you're speaking to the fact that you were engaged in something.
That's all really good advice. I really appreciate that. I actually want to build off Kyle a little bit of what you're saying too. Do you have ways also maybe of strategically trying to talk about like your power or like perspective as a patient advocate? Shanna, you as well, like, are there ways that you sort of strategically have found it's more helpful to frame being an advocate, or ways that people start to really connect and be like, oh yes, like this is a perspective we've been missing. This is a real strength that someone could bring.
Yeah, for me, I'm a big proponent of, having clear like taglines. They're clear, like a couple words for each, and really speaking to, knowing your why, understanding your purpose, understanding your value, and finding buckets that a lot of people can relate to. Because I think anybody, despite whatever their background is always trying to find a purpose, or they're always wanting to, understand different perspectives. Something that I've found to be very valuable as I'm navigating, how do I link with other advocates and kind of have a shared common theme, is utilizing those hashtags have been really helpful. And then also, maybe tagging organizations or other people I'm speaking with, and really speaking about the community at large versus just me solely. I always try to involve whoever I'm talking with or advocating with together, because I think collectively the voice is stronger than just saying, I did this, because really the professional, it's networking. You're bringing the group together.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And like I said about curating too, there is ways to build a cadence around the issue, even if you're not out and about doing meetings and it's not a part of your profession. You can still share things with context. And as I was saying earlier, about LinkedIn specifically, it's just it's had a lot of growth over the last couple years. And people are getting more used to seeing more kind of personal information there. I think through the pandemic, before the pandemic, it was strictly like new job, promotion, achievement. And the tone has shifted as our culture has shifted, and people are really humanizing themselves on LinkedIn now. And so again, just sharing why an article is newsworthy to you, sharing something that Every Life puts out or something, and just contextualizing it a little bit gives you something to say to raise your voice without having to create the wheel or tell a real personal narrative.
That's all definitely helpful too. I think, especially in terms of framing advocacy, I just want to note really fast for anyone, especially watching the recording, that because YAR is a program that includes those in the rare disease community, so also like siblings or like children or other relatives, close friends, that if you do want to talk about like advocacy in YAR, you don't necessarily have to out yourself as a patient to do so. So just in terms of some strategic language there as well, quick caveat. But there's actually another question in the Q&A that I think follows pretty well from this. It goes back a little bit to the education piece, but from a different angle. And this is definitely not an uncommon situation for a lot of young adults. Someone is asking if you left an education program without graduating for health or pandemic related reasons. Is there a good way to showcase part of it without seeming like false advertising of your education, or is leaving it all off together the safest bet? How would you go about this? Any advice?
I can say, as I review quite a few resumes for working at my agency, I think if you have completed some form of education, even if you didn't finish it, as long as it's like a semester or something, you can showcase that as an achievement. If it's something that you do plan to finish, I see a lot of people use the words candidate for like a undergraduate or bachelor's or a master's. That tells me you are working towards that, but you haven't completed it. Or if you think you're finished, you can say completed 4 semesters in this program, and then you're showcasing it as an achievement. Even if it wasn't a full degree, you can still say that you completed it because that is something that you did. And so I think those are 2 really strong options, but not necessary to leave it off. Just be honest, I think. You never want a gotcha.
I reiterate that. I think it's it speaks to your experiences and the fact that you've gone through that process. But I think also, especially in this the world we live in, I think you're going to see more and more kind of stopping and starting of, and I think that's the nature of the world we live in. So if it comes up, you can always speak to it.
Great. And especially in the context too of like having additional coursework or additional information, like it always feels like erring on the side of showing what your strengths are and showing what your knowledge is. I want to lead too into another question that someone is asking with like specific situations that honestly also a lot of young adults may encounter. How should jobs that were taken as a means to an end during health issues be represented on your page, especially if they seem like a sharp detour in your background or previous work? The parentheses in the question say the resume format isn't super easy to work with for things that need to be explained further, sort of like a back and forth career journey. So do y'all have any advice or information on how you've seen this look in the past or what you would do?
Again, when I look at resumes, I do agree. And I think Kyle said this earlier. Sometimes just leaving the gap begs more questions than just addressing it up front. And so I think just give it the amount of attention that it deserves. So you don't have to identify who the employer was. You can just say retail experience, or food service experience, or, assuming it wasn't a job you want to get into and you don't feel like you got a lot out of, but you want to account for the time period, then I think you can just leave it as a general overview of the type of work you were doing. And I think if most employers would look at that quite favorably as an achievement and understanding and applaud that. I know, from where I sit reviewing resumes, it takes a strong person to do a lot of those jobs. And so we look at all of that work experience as good experience.
Yeah, I think for me, I've done a lot of recruitment for, early careers who are exiting undergrad or graduate school to enter fellowships and other roles. And I think the biggest thing that we found is, the resume is a big piece of it, but oftentimes there's a cover letter, sometimes there's other things that are part of the package, and you can speak to that there. But I think, frankly, if I were to see someone that, had a diverse background in a variety of things, it would just allow me to see, oh, wow, they have a really good toolbox to pull from, and leveraging that versus saying, oh, it's a complete detour in my role. I think we live in a world now where having the diversity of, we have side hustles, things like that, it's embraced versus like question. I mean, some will, but I think being open and honest about it is very helpful.
That all definitely helps. And also I think the theme is just really coming out of like finding ways to be honest, but like frame your own stories in terms of all of your strengths, like really talk about the journey as a whole. This pivots a little bit, Kyle. This is mostly for you. A question sort of about what you've also seen now from being honest about your journey on LinkedIn, talking about your professional successes. Have you received any advocacy opportunities from your LinkedIn profile, and what sort of happened, if that's true?
That's a great question. I've been reached recently, I think I'm last year and a half. I've been reached out for a lot of opportunities in the healthcare space, but then more recently advocacy has come about. And I think I had a discussion with, it was more of a colleague or a friend, a professional colleague, someone else reached out and said, hey, you should look into maybe speaking at this event or applying to this. So it's really about, it may not be just it might not be just a direct invite, but more of a sharing about opportunities. And that's something that's really key with LinkedIn, is having that network to share opportunities about, maybe you can go to this conference or speak at this panel, etc. If I were to give an example, something that most recently happened is a colleague through LinkedIn reached out and told me about a living rare forum with Nord, and they said, hey, you should look into maybe applying to become a speaker. And I was like, I would have never thought of doing that, a year or two ago, and I applied and I ended up speaking. So it does become more frequent. Those opportunities come up, and it's really nice to be able to have them kind of push towards you versus you having to look for them. Again, it's a gradual process. I would say a couple of years ago, it was more just like I would say it wasn't as prominent, but as you get more and more involved, people become to know you in the community, the more people are going to leverage you or even reach out to you for conversations.
Yeah, that feels remarkably positive. And I also want to add, on that flip side of building your community, like, do y'all have any advice about also how to reach out to other connections, like new folks in your network that you're coming into contact with, and how to start to build outward a little bit toward people you admire, towards potential colleagues, just towards parts of the community you want to be more involved with?
I guess I can take a stab at that. I think networking isn't for everyone. So just like networking at a cocktail party or a business event, some conversations will go better than others. And so you just have to have a thick skin and go out there and put yourself out there a little bit. I've definitely reached out to people who I've seen post that they're going to an event or post something, and then I say, hey, I'm thinking about attending that. What do you think? Or and you can do it as private messages instead of in a public comment, if that's what you're comfortable with. And using programs like this or connecting with other YARs so that you build up your community, family, friends, other students in class. Like I said in the beginning, it's important to continuously be building so that when you do share this, you're not just talking to the same 10 people over and over. And if you're not out and about all the time, virtually, or some people just have jobs where there's not a lot of networking involved, then I do think it is on you to spend some time. I even sometimes put it as a calendar item where I set aside 15 minutes every morning to just be on LinkedIn and just scroll and see what's interesting and push myself to make one connection. But I think one thing people don't like, especially on LinkedIn, is just an empty LinkedIn request without qualifying why we should be connected. Some people will be very open about who they include in their communities, and some people prefer to know people. Again, this is where you have to understand. But if I get a message from someone that says, hey, I saw you present on the YAR session, I enjoyed what you said, let's connect, I'll be like, oh, we did semi-connect. I might not know you directly, but they had a position. And if I reach out to someone respectively who I saw on stage somewhere, who I want to network with, I read your article, or I saw you present on this webinar, I'll reach out and say, I would love to connect. And as long as I qualify it with why you're meaningful to me, I'm not spam, and then we connect. And then if I really want to form that relationship, I might follow up with them or even ask them for a virtual coffee meeting.
And I do very similar in the sense of, reaching out, messaging individuals that you may have interacted with before, or you saw an interesting article or an event they're going to. I think something from you know, in an early career perspective in the rare disease space is you can often find individuals that may be in a similar, you know, profession or a similar experience that you're kind of looking to get more insight on, and people are more than willing to have a 15-minute conversation. And it may not be someone that has necessarily, you know, a rare disease background, but they may be somebody that's really willing to help you professionally. I think another thing that I found really valuable is beginning to you know, see who are some of my mutual connections and other people that I'm connected to, because as you get your LinkedIn kind of your presence bigger and bigger, people start connecting you because you're within a similar industry or space. And I think making intentional time to have conversations with your LinkedIn connections, whether it be maybe a couple of months, is really valuable, especially if you're in a very remote based world, as we're not having those, you know, hallway conversations, etc. And also being willing to support others, you know, that are coming, that may be seeking your advice as well. I think everybody has value and ideas to bring. And I often try to put on, you know, whenever I do a post every once in a while, I say, you ever have any questions or you want to talk through this or how you get involved, I always have an open invitation, and including in my bio.
That's beautiful. I also just love like the sense of collaboration you all are both talking about. I know you both mentioned like reviewing applications now, reviewing different resumes, and also have obviously been on the flip end with like starting to build at some point your early career, your resume. One of the questions here is also about like if you've found it helpful in the past to use like any like paid LinkedIn or career development consultants, maybe like a school or university center, other folks. Like who would you turn to if you maybe needed some help with that career development? What do you tend to find helpful in someone who could be like a helpful mentor along the lines of answering questions?
Kyle, you want to go first?
Sure. So I've never, in terms of services, I have, but I've really leaned on these groups like this, or when I was in college, my career services. But primarily, a lot of it has been kind of taking little bits and pieces from other profiles that are really strong, and building out my own personal brand on LinkedIn, and also getting advice from mentors, etc. And I think the biggest thing I like to say is my profile is always evolving. It's like anything. I mean, we need to always continue to evolve and iterate. And for me, trying to learn what's the best practices. And if you look at my posts, let's say 3 years ago to now, they definitely evolved as well. So being open to that. I know there are services out there that they can really help you get that first step, but I encourage you to really maybe, you know, lean on some of these resources like what we have here or peers to give you that insight. I think the biggest thing though is LinkedIn does take time and a lot of time at the front end to really get it built out right. But once you have the foundation, it starts to get a little more easy to kind of keep it going.
Absolutely, Kyle. That's so true. We have a saying, social media is free, like a puppy is free. It takes a lot of care and feeding. And so, yeah, just because you set up your profile, you kind of get out what you put in. So that's why I recommend setting aside time, like building it into your calendar if it doesn't come naturally to you. Personally, I go on LinkedIn every day, so I know that comes pretty easy. But if I want to do some concerted networking, then I definitely set aside calendar time to either work on my profile or force myself to comment or message on something to really help grow the profile. I would also encourage people who are going through the process. People will reach out to me and ask for feedback on their profile. As a potential employer, I'm happy to take a peek, and, you know, if they're in my industry, I recommend you go to someone in your industry. Similarly, the committee that does the hiring at my firm, and we're only a 30-person firm, we're a small shop. There's a few people that run the interviews, and so they'll often get people who follow up who might not get the position, and they say, would you mind spending time with me to give me feedback? And my team absolutely will always take time to go back and say, here's what your weaknesses were, here's what your strengths were, here's what we think you could do better. and they're happy to spend time. So if you ever feel like you're not getting somewhere that you should be, or people are, the culture is very feedback oriented, and people generally do want to be helpful. And so as long as you ask, I think people will take a few minutes to help you.
I love how much this also like emphasizes that while it does take time and effort, like there are things that people can do no matter where they are in their advocacy or what resources they have available. Like even if you have more barriers to actually finding like, you know, a coach, like a direct mentor, like there are things you can start to do and start to take steps to actually get there. Also off of what you're saying, Shanna, positive success story. I have a mentor who is lovely from a past internship that I had, who actually helped me really early on, right as I was graduating, trying to frame my resume. And we got to talk a lot through what my interests were and what my past skills and experiences were in the process of her helping me. My own LinkedIn is a lot better, but also she ended up realizing that she should introduce me to Annie Kennedy, who works at the Every Life Foundation, for a brief 30-minute coffee chat. And now I have worked here for about a year. So we see where this goes. Which I just feel like really goes to show that there is like really positive outcomes from a lot of this. We're definitely approaching 7, so I just want to check if either of you have any last thoughts, advice, maybe resources that people should check out, or anything else that you just don't feel like you've gotten to say yet.
I think I just echo, Courtney, what you just said. I just think social media has opened up so many doors for me, just by being visible and being a participant. Everything from, jobs to clients to speaking opportunities, and sometimes that leads to travel and to having my name in articles. And so there's so much opportunity. Again, it is about you get out what you put in. So I encourage people to invest some time, because the outcomes can just be very serendipitous and very rewarding.
I echo all those statements. I think, you know, LinkedIn and other social media platforms that allowed our voices to be heard, and with that really be create an impact on the community. All that being said, I do encourage everybody to get outside, enjoy some nature, and get away from social media every once in a while, because I think it's really healthy for the mind. But again, feel free to reach out to me personally if you have any questions. Happy to review anybody's profiles and be a point of contact for support.
Thank you both so much for speaking and giving advice, especially for folks who are watching the recording. Please do go back and like screenshot or take down any of that contact information if you would like. After this, I'm going to go process all this information by taking a nice walk, Kyle, and just thinking through all of the good advice. So thank you everyone so much for watching. Thank you both so much for speaking. And just, really well wishes for everything.